Welcome to Medieval History Channel 97, where the echoes of the past come alive. Step into the world of knights, castles, and forgotten legends as we journey through time together. Let history speak. Hey guys, tonight we step into a world both breathtaking and brutal, the elegant, disciplined, and often merciless realm of feudal Japan. This isn't just history, it's a place where honor weighs heavier than life itself, where every action echoes through rigid codes carved deep into the soul. It's a land of fleeting cherry blossoms, hauntingly beautiful poetry, and a daily grind so relentless it would break the strongest among us before the sun reaches its peak. So before we dive in, take a moment, if this resonates with you, to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly feel drawn to this journey. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, what hour it is for you. There's something magical about knowing that somewhere across the globe we're walking this path together. Now lower the lights, let the soft murmur of a fan whisper beside you, and allow yourself to be carried gently into this story. In feudal Japan, your fate is not yours to command. You do not wake and choose your destiny. It is carved into your very existence before your first breath, sealed by birth, blood, and the silent judgment of ancestors 6 generations past. Your place in society isn't a hopeful suggestion or a goal to reach. It's a sentence, binding and unyielding. Were you born into the samurai class? Consider yourself both blessed and burdened. You inherit the blade, the bow, and 1,000 silent rituals, each one demanding perfection. Every step you take, every gesture you make, is measured against a code so strict it will consume you if you falter. Your honor is your life, and failure is unthinkable. Born a peasant, then prepare yourself for a life spent knee-deep in mud, sweat, and the bitter taste of sacrifice. You'll toil endlessly, the weight of the earth pressing down on your back, your children inheriting the same fate, trapped in a cycle without escape, generation after generation. There is no resume here, no business cards or entrepreneurial dreams. Your role is fixed, samurai, peasant, artisan, or merchant, and stepping outside this prescribed box isn't just frowned upon, it's dangerous. Attempting to climb the social ladder invites ruin, not reward. In feudal Japan, you don't chase success, you bow to the hierarchy that binds you. And then there are the Ada, the untouchables. Invisible yet indispensable. They confront death every day as butchers, executioners, leather workers, carrying society's darkest burdens while being forced into shadows. They live as ghosts in plain sight, their work vital yet shunned, their presence denied. Even within the classes, the struggle twists deeper. Take the merchants, for example. On paper, they hold wealth, the symbol of power, but in this world, money earned without labor is suspect, even dishonorable. Efficiency and profit become marks of moral failure. You might have coin, but you're near the bottom of the ladder, looked down upon for making money in dishonest ways. Meanwhile, the peasants bleed under crushing taxes on their rice. They are squeezed so hard that even a small cough to hide a fraction of their harvest risks starvation or execution. Survival itself is a dangerous game, a whispered act of rebellion punishable by death. Heads roll, dreams die in silence. This was a world where the shimmer of beauty, cherry blossoms drifting like snow, collided with the harsh reality of unbreakable chains. A world where honor and cruelty walked hand in hand. So, as we walk through feudal Japan tonight, remember, beneath the poetry and discipline, there's an unrelenting pulse of human struggle, sacrifice, and resilience that still speaks to us today. Samurai, you carry honor like a weighty armor, yet beneath it lies a quiet terror, a constant gnawing fear of disrespecting your lord, your ancestors, your tailor, or even your sword. All it takes is a single careless sneeze at the wrong moment, and your world trembles. This fear isn't just about pride. It's the ever-present shadow that shapes every breath you take, every move you make. To live under such vigilance is to walk a razor's edge, where even a bodily reflex can feel like a betrayal. Women, you think perhaps your story is different, untouched by these invisible chains? No, you are woven into this tapestry as tightly as anyone else. Your voice is not even sought, your path is already chosen for you. Your freedom dissolves the moment your father's opinion takes root. You will marry the man assigned to you, obey the commands laid down, and if fortune smiles, you may glimpse the world of poetry, but only as a fleeting dream. Your life, like a costume passed down through generations, is already tailored and sewn before you can even question its fit. So yes, you are born, assigned a costume, handed a script, and thrust onto the grand stage of society. Whether you wish to perform or not, you must play your part. It is a performance elegant in its tradition, poetic in its form, but crushing in its inevitability. And astonishingly, all of this unfolds before you even taste your morning meal. You might imagine feudal life as harsh and grimy, but Japan took cleanliness seriously, painfully seriously. It was almost a religion in itself, a ritual that shaped the rhythm of daily life. Lovely in thought, perhaps, but brutal in reality, especially when winter's chill bites deep. Your day begins not with warmth and comfort, but at a stone basin filled with ice-cold water drawn from a well or mountain stream. There is no gentle negotiation with the elements, no soothing towel or fragrant soap to soften the experience. You splash your face and arms, shivering violently, as if the very ancestors are reminding you of your frailty and demanding purity through discomfort. Soap is a luxury, reserved only for the wealthy. Even then, it is crude, made from ash or rice bran, with a scent so earthy and austere it feels like a monk's austere challenge to your character. In the countryside, the local bathhouse, if your village is lucky enough to have one, becomes the pulsating heart of hygiene and social life. This communal bath, heated by firewood, is filled with neighbors, bosses, future in-laws, and perhaps even your landlord. Privacy is a forgotten concept here. You bathe side by side, naked and silent, each pretending the awkwardness does not exist, bound together in shared vulnerability. The ritual is strict. First, scrub every inch of yourself clean, then soak in the steaming water. Cleanliness is sacred. Polluting the bathwater is an unforgivable social crime. But if no bathhouse is near, you do what you can when you can. Teeth are cleaned with coarse salt or a twig. Nails are kept neatly trimmed. Clothes are aired diligently, for the appearance of cleanliness must never falter. You don't follow these rituals because they're fashionable or fleeting trends. No, in feudal Japan, being unclean wasn't just about dirt. It was a mark of shame that cut deep, both spiritually and socially. Imagine the crushing weight of that shame resting on your very skin, your very being. Now, if you happen to be a samurai, the pressure doesn't just double, it multiplies into an invisible force that never lets up. Your lord could be watching, inspecting every inch of you from head to toe at any moment. A single speck of dirt under your fingernails isn't just untidiness, it's dishonor. A wrinkled robe? That's not mere carelessness, it's a public display of disrespect. And if you dare bow with even the slightest hint of body odor, well, you might never rise again. Not just physically, but in status and spirit. For women, the expectations were no less suffocating. They were meant to embody the delicate fragrance of cherry blossoms and the unwavering strength of discipline. Bathing was more than hygiene, it was a sacred ritual. Skincare wasn't pampering, it was military precision. Hairstyles weren't casual, they were elaborate, painstakingly crafted works of art that demanded hours, all so that a woman could pound rice with dignity, grace intact. Yes, feudal Japan was pristine, shockingly so, but the cleanliness came at a steep, almost unbearable cost. The bitter chill of freezing water biting at your skin, endless grooming that felt like an unrelenting ceremony, and the soul-crushing, constant awareness that someone somewhere was silently judging you. Maybe your foot hygiene wasn't up to the impossible standard. Now, picture this. You're born into the warrior class, the samurai. At first, it sounds like the stuff of legend. Gleaming swords, flowing silk robes, poetic battles beneath cascading cherry blossoms. But here's the fine print no one tells you. Being a samurai isn't about the romanticized clash of katana or shouting your honor to the skies. It's about a relentless, unyielding perfection. You are bound, body and soul, to Bushido, the way of the warrior, a code so strict, so unforgiving, even the ghosts of your ancestors would shudder. Your life is no longer your own. You live to serve your daimyo, your lord. His word isn't just law, it's the very atmosphere you breathe, shifting with his every mood like an unpredictable storm. Your duty is absolute loyalty. You would rather face a gruesome death than risk the faintest disappointment. The weight of this expectation presses down, suffocating and severe. Disobedience means dishonor. Failure means dishonor. Raising your voice at the wrong moment or casting a sideways glance during a tea ceremony, it all spirals into dishonor. And dishonor, it's no fleeting stain you can wash away. It's a wound so deep that society demands you atone, often with your own life, cutting into your own flesh to reclaim what was lost. That's not a metaphor. That's seppuku, the ritual suicide expected of disgraced samurai. You kneel, pull out a short blade, and let's stop there. You get the idea. This wasn't rare. It was a respected, even celebrated way to preserve dignity. Mess up badly enough and your lord might give you a short blade in a quiet room and say, you know what to do. Beyond that, samurai were expected to train constantly: swordsmanship, archery, horseback riding, strategy, calligraphy, poetry, all while maintaining perfect posture and the expression of a man who's never known joy, just a deep sense of obligation. Laughing too loud? Unrefined. Showing fear, weakness, getting emotional? Shameful. Your clothes are precise, your sword must be spotless, and your conduct must be so honorable it makes other people uncomfortable. If you ever raise your sword in anger without cause, insult a superior, or lose a duel, you don't just lose, you lose everything. Being a samurai isn't about glory, it's about discipline, silence, and surviving each day without blinking wrong. So yes, you look good in armor, but you're one eyebrow twitch away from existential catastrophe. But you weren't born a samurai. No sword, no poetry, no chance of dramatic ritual disembowelment. That's the good news. The bad news? You're a peasant, which means your entire existence is a mixture of dirt, sweat, back pain, and government-mandated rice delivery. You wake with the sun, not because you're one with nature, but because the land tax doesn't pay itself. Your thatched hut has no doors or windows, and someone's goat just trampled across your bed mat. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is a bowl of rice porridge and a side of last week's pickled leftovers. If you're unlucky, it's pretending you're not hungry, washing down your hunger with a splash of river water. Then you head to the rice fields, which sound peaceful in travel documentaries, but are actually muddy pits designed to wear down your soul slowly. For over 12 hours, you plant, weed, and hope a bandit raid doesn't ruin your day. When the sun finally sets, you limp home to find one of your oxen missing and the village headman waiting to discuss your grain shortfall. Taxes are relentless. You don't get paid in coins. You pay in rice. Your family eats what's left, which isn't much, especially if the harvest was bad or if your lord's nephew accidentally rode a horse through your plot during a military drill and you want to complain. That's adorable. You can't. Talking back gets you whipped, exiled, or promoted to corpse. If you're really lucky, you might become a village elder. Imagine that. Becoming a village elder means people still don't truly listen to you. They only ask for your advice right before ignoring it completely. The weight of silence is heavier than any whip. And remember, you're legally chained to your village. Leaving without permission is forbidden. You are, in essence, a rice-based prisoner, marked by the seasons and the ritual of ankle-rot festivals, trapped by both earth and law. There are festivals where you stumble drunk on sake, dance in endless circles, trying desperately not to think about the relentless cycle. Planting season starts again in 4 days. A brief moment of forgetting before the sweat, the soil, the unending toil. You are the foundation, the very backbone of the economy, the reason samurai eat, yet the person everyone seems to forget exists. No, you do not get a day off. Feudal Japan does not know rest. It knows hard work, generational suffering, and crushingly low expectations. Of course, you're hungry. You have been tilling, planting, sweating, and politely not dying since sunrise. Now it's time to eat. But meals aren't celebrations. They are survival, simplicity, and a delicate dance to avoid choking on a fishbone in front of your in-laws because dignity must be preserved even when hunger claws at your insides. If you're a peasant, your diet is rice. Rice for breakfast, rice for lunch, rice for dinner. If luck favors you, it's real rice. If not, it's barley, playing a poor imitation. Maybe a turnip or two. Perhaps some pickled radish, only if the gods are merciful. Meat? That's a luxury for the daimyo, or for that one chicken who gave you a strange look before disappearing mysteriously. Fish is a rare visitor. Dried, salted, sharp enough to file your teeth. Soup? Usually miso, if you can even call hot salt water with 2 floating leaves soup. It's flavorful, yes, in the same way seawater hydrates. Now, if you're a samurai, your food is better, but you still eat last after your lord, his guests, and anyone he wishes to impress. This means cold rice, cold soup, and the endless, quiet agony of watching others feast while pretending you're deeply honored to wait. Everything is seasonal, not because it's fashionable, but because there is no refrigeration, no global supply chain. If you don't harvest it yourself, it simply does not exist. Winter is nature's harsh decree, fasting by default, survival by will alone. Heaven forbid you suffer from food poisoning here. The medical care, optimistic at best. The local remedy, simply lie down and think about your ancestors. You'll either pull through or become one of them. There's a chilling finality in that. It's as if healing and death dance hand in hand, and the outcome depends on fate's fickle mercy. Food theft is no trivial matter. It's a grave offense. Steal a single bowl of rice and you won't merely face a slap on the wrist. Instead, you'll endure a public shaming, a harsh lesson in respect. They'll make sure everyone knows exactly why no one dares touch the daimo's daikon tea. That tea, elusive, mysterious, steeped in tradition, is nothing like what you might imagine. The tea ceremony itself is less about quenching thirst and more about embodying posture, etiquette, and an almost painful humility before existence itself. Meals here are sacred rituals, quiet, respectful affairs. Yet, don't expect richness or variety. Mostly, food is bland, modest in portion, and always hiding at least one crunch of mystery that sets your teeth on edge. Complaining? That's not an option. Not unless you want your next meal delivered, quite literally, through your nose. The thought alone is enough to silence any protest. So you finish your humble bowl of crunchy, maybe fish-infused soup, and then someone speaks out of turn. Utter nonsense spills forth. Perhaps your lord mumbles a bad haiku, or your village elder mangles a proverb, or your neighbor insists his cow forecasts the weather better than any scholar. And for one foolish moment, you consider correcting them. Resist the urge. In feudal Japan, your opinion is a liability, a dangerous weight dragging you toward disgrace. Free speech, it's not even a concept here. It's a swift path to exile, disgrace, or a sudden, irrevocable end by the sharp edge of a blade. The social hierarchy is an unyielding fortress, and every word is a test of loyalty and respect. Speak above your station and you're impudent. Criticize a superior and you're insolent. Even a failed joke might be taken as treasonous. Within families, caution reigns supreme. A son never interrupts his father. A wife never corrects her husband. No one, absolutely no one, questions the daimo unless they are ready to meet the afterlife through the tip of a sword. Samurai are trained to speak with measured calm, even when fury burns beneath the surface. A sharp tongue worse than a dull blade. It's unbecoming. It's dangerous. It might force someone into the terrible position of restoring their honor through bloodshed, and you don't want to be that cause. Which brings us to apologies, the ultimate art in this world. Saying sorry here is no mere word. It is a performance, a ritual of bows, groveling, perhaps even a sorrowful poem about your shame. Sometimes you must send a gift, a live bird, a delicate comb, while praying that the offended party chooses mercy over vengeance. Because in this world, honor is fragile and forgiveness is not freely given. And gods help you if your tone is too casual. Just one careless word, one slip of phrase, and suddenly you're trapped, misunderstood as sarcasm, defiance, or worse, spiritual decay. The weight of every syllable presses down, making silence not just safe, but a shield. Humor itself becomes a razor's edge. Laugh the wrong way and you risk being branded disrespectful. Laugh the right way but with the wrong person, and you might as well be declaring yourself their equal. That's the perilous dance that often ends with people mysteriously sent off to the cold, unforgiving far north. Yes, technically you have the freedom to speak, but in reality, you nod, you smile, and you pray your thoughts never betray you by escaping your lips. Because in feudal Japan, loose lips don't merely sink ships, they sink your social standing, your honor, your very reputation. And sometimes your entire existence in this rigid world isn't about what you say or feel. It's a silent declaration etched in fabric and thread, a visible reminder of how far beneath others you stand. Your sleeves don't tell your story. They broadcast your place in a hierarchy older than memory, your purpose, and even whether you're allowed to carry a sword without risking a swift and painful lesson from a samurai. At the top, samurai wear their power with an effortless grace. Layers of silk robes, sometimes armored, always dignified, are arranged with precision to proclaim status and readiness. The colors speak volumes, deep blues like midnight seas, earthy browns like ancient forests, and the occasional blood red whispering a silent threat, I have killed a man for less than a fashion faux pas. And the swords, the daiso, the twin long and short blades, are far more than weapons. They are living symbols of authority, of life and death in the palm of a hand. Drawing a sword in public is a final desperate act. Wearing them incorrectly, a blatant invitation for swift and merciless correction. Meanwhile, peasants wear cotton woven with humility. Brown, gray, and beige are the colors of survival, not choice. It's not minimalism, it's necessity. Dyed fabric costs money they don't have. Their clothes shout their reality. Yes, I labor in the mud. No, I didn't choose this life. Yes, these are the only sandals I own. Merchants, with their pockets heavier but their status lighter, dress in finer fabrics but with muted tones. Silk, yes, but subdued. Rich enough to survive scrutiny, but not enough to attract the sharp gaze of a bored samurai on patrol. Their wealth is a quiet thing, wrapped in careful restraint. Our artisans and craftsmen wear neat, modest clothes designed to last and to be forgotten. To draw attention to oneself is a flaw, a character defect. Their clothing doesn't boast, it blends. Because in this world, blending is often the difference between survival and disgrace. And then there are women who must strike a delicate balance between grace, obedience, and wearing layers of folded symbolism. Hairstyles are coded, kimono patterns are seasonal, and if you wear a color meant for a different festival, congratulations, you've just dishonored your entire household and possibly started a neighborhood whisper war. In short, what you wear isn't just about clothing, it's about rank, ritual, and surviving daily judgment from both heaven and your mother-in-law. So you're imagining moonlit walks beneath cherry blossoms, whispered poetry under paper lanterns, perhaps a dramatic kiss between a samurai and a forbidden princess? Yeah, no. In feudal Japan, love is a side quest, and not one you're likely to complete. Marriage isn't about feelings. It's about alliances, status, rice, taxes, and not embarrassing your ancestors. If you're a peasant, your marriage is arranged by your parents and maybe the village elder. Romantic compatibility isn't discussed. Sturdy legs and healthy teeth are considered more important. If you're from a samurai family, the stakes are even higher. Marriages are tools of politics. Your partner is chosen to solidify a clan alliance, secure land, or pay off a grudge with a nice kimono. The goal isn't happiness, it's stability. Ideally, one that doesn't collapse during harvest season. Love letters, maybe, but only if they're written in perfect calligraphy, using the appropriate seasonal metaphors, and passed along discreetly by a maid who definitely knows too much. Women, of course, have even less say. A samurai daughter may be married off at 15, required to master calligraphy, etiquette, needlework, and the fine art of never expressing disappointment out loud. Her job is to bear sons, serve tea, and absolutely never fall in love with the flute teacher. Actual romantic love, the kind with stolen glances and passionate declarations, is the domain of poets, theater plays, and tragic ghost stories. If you want to experience love in feudal Japan, you'll need to watch a no drama about two doomed lovers who turn into mist. Beneath these words lies a heavy, often suffocating reality. Imagine the quiet ache of a woman whose every choice, down to the color she drapes over her shoulders, speaks volumes about honor or shame. The pressure to move with grace while concealing any flicker of rebellion weighs like an invisible chain, binding her to expectations older than she is. In this world, love is not a flame to be nurtured, but a flickering shadow cast by duty's harsh light. The heart's longing is muted beneath the cacophony of alliances, rice yields, and ancestral pride. There's a painful loneliness in knowing your future was decided before your first breath, your desires secondary to political games played by men in distant halls. And yet, within the silence of those moonlit nights, when cherry blossoms scatter like whispered secrets, a fragile hope still lingers, held only in the wistful verses of poets, the delicate movements of theater, and the haunting echo of ghostly tales. Love is a phantom, beautiful and unreachable, a dream preserved not in reality, but in art's mournful embrace. This is not the love of fairy tales. It is a love carved from restraint, sacrifice, and the bittersweet knowledge that sometimes the deepest passions are the ones left unspoken. If you try to step outside your assigned relationship structure, good luck. Adultery can lead to exile, disgrace, or death by sword-related disapproval. The punishment might be carried out by your spouse, your lord, or your in-laws, whoever gets there first. The weight of this threat hangs over every whispered temptation, every stolen glance. It's not just a rule, it's a looming shadow that suffocates the heart before it even dares to beat for someone forbidden. Even for samurai, taking a concubine was common, but that didn't make things easier. It only added more silent disappointments, more broken promises muffled beneath the heavy silence of duty, more people whose pain was swallowed in quiet because honor demanded it. The loneliness behind the armor was real, palpable, and no less painful. So yes, people fell in love, secretly, painfully, occasionally with the wrong person, and always at the worst possible time. Because in feudal Japan, love wasn't forbidden, it was just dangerously inconvenient. It was a fragile flame flickering in the midst of a storm, desperate to survive but constantly threatened by the cold winds of obligation and expectation. In feudal Japan, death isn't a distant concept. It's your neighbor, your coworker, your roommate who never pays rent but is always around. It's a constant presence, lurking in the corners of daily life. You don't plan for retirement. You plan for your exit. Because death isn't a tragedy here. It's part of the script, woven into every moment, waiting patiently like a silent audience that applauds your final bow. Let's start with the samurai. These honorable warriors walk around with 2 swords and a personal death plan. If they lose a battle, seppuku. Insult their honor, seppuku. Spill sake on the daimyo's robe, seppuku, with dramatic background music. And it's not private, it's a public ceremony. The ritual's chilling precision masks a storm of pain and pride, a dance with death performed not out of despair, but out of an unyielding code. Theirs is a world where life and death are inseparable partners in a relentless waltz, and performed with the same precision as a tea ceremony, but with significantly more internal bleeding. Don't think peasants are getting a longer life. If you're a farmer and the rice harvest fails, you're starving. If your village can't meet its tax quota, your head might be used to make a very stern point. Every day is a battle against hunger, disease, and oppression. The earth beneath their feet feels as unforgiving as the blade at their necks. Drought, plague, bandit raid, pick your flavor of sudden demise. Good luck fighting any of it when your most advanced medicine is warm tea and a strong belief in herbal optimism. Hope becomes a scarce commodity, whispered quietly in the dark before dawn. Speaking of bandits, they're real, they're everywhere, and they don't care that you spent all year growing those daikon radishes. The roads outside towns are so dangerous that people just don't travel unless absolutely necessary. The phrase, "maybe we'll visit your cousin next year," actually means "I enjoy being alive." Every journey carries the weight of uncertainty. Every step outside the village, a gamble with fate. If you're a woman, childbirth is a dice roll. Complications, too bad. Midwives are helpful, but surgical options are mostly pray harder and boil another towel. The fragile thread between life and death during birth is woven with uncertainty and silent fears. Every breath your child takes feels like a miracle wrestled from the hands of fate. And the pain, oh the pain, it is endured not just physically, but in a vast ocean of solitude and quiet resilience. If your husband dies in disgrace, you might be expected to follow him, not emotionally, but literally with a dagger. Imagine the crushing weight of such expectation, where grief is not allowed to bloom, but must be choked down, replaced by an act of brutal loyalty. Your identity, your very existence, hinges on the honor of another. There is no space for personal sorrow, only the cold duty to uphold a family's name in the starkest way possible. And let's not forget nature itself. Earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, famines. Japan is a disaster artist. Your home could be washed away or buried at any time, and the only insurance policy is a well-tied roof and deep spiritual acceptance. This relentless dance with calamity leaves no room for complaint or despair, only the hard-won peace of surrender. The earth itself seems to conspire to remind you that life is fragile, fleeting, and beautifully terrifying all at once. But perhaps the darkest part is you're expected to accept it all calmly. Wailing in fear or fighting fate is considered undignified. A real hero bows before death, composes a poem, and meets their end like it's just another awkward dinner with your clan. To show fear is weakness, to resist fate is folly. The human spirit is asked to bend, to quiet its storm, and wear stoicism like a second skin, no matter how much it aches underneath. So yes, feudal Japan is beautiful, but mortality is part of the decor. It lingers in every shadow, whispers behind every cherry blossom, and colors every smile with a quiet sorrow. Life and death are inseparable companions in this delicate, devastating dance. In modern life, you're told to follow your dreams, be your own person, and live your truth. In feudal Japan, your truth is whatever your clan tells you it is. Individualism isn't a virtue, it's a red flag. Your desires, your hopes, your very essence must be folded into a greater narrative, one not authored by you but by the collective memory and expectations of those who came before. You exist not as a lone star of destiny, but as a very small branch on a very important family tree. Your job is to keep that tree from catching fire due to any embarrassing behavior, like expressing opinions or falling in love with a merchant's daughter. The pressure to conform crushes the soul's wild flight. Every step you take must be measured, calculated, and guarded, not just for yourself, but for generations who will be judged by your shadow. Your clan is everything. Your identity, your reputation, your future. It all flows through your family name. You are part of a web of obligations, honor, and expectations so dense it might as well be a spiritual spreadsheet. The weight of legacy bears down like a mountain on your shoulders. Every action is audited, every misstep noted. Freedom feels like a distant echo, barely remembered beneath the hum of duty. Even the samurai, proud, honorable warriors, don't fight for themselves. They fight for their daimyo, their household, their ancestors. If they die, ideally, it's in a way that makes everyone above them look great. Their courage is not just personal valor, it is the armor protecting a lineage, a history, a sacred trust. Because dying with honor is one thing, but dying in a way that slightly embarrasses your clan, that's the stuff of generational nightmares. The fear of shame is a ghost that haunts every breath. It binds them to a path so narrow that even the slightest stumble echoes through time, staining the names of those yet unborn. Your actions reflect on your father. Your father's actions reflect on your grandfather. Your grandfather's actions may still be affecting how your cousin is treated in the next province over. It's not guilt by association, it's life by association. Your identity is not yours alone, it is shared, inherited, and guarded fiercely by unseen eyes and ancient expectations. Want to open a noodle shop because you love cooking? That's adorable. But in feudal Japan, your destiny is already sealed. Your clan raises horses, and so you'll be brushing hooves until the end of your days. No exceptions. Dream of expressing yourself through painting? Wonderful. But don't expect freedom. You'll be assigned to decorate the temple your family sponsors, following strict, unyielding guidelines, and all in total silence. No room for personal flair or rebellious strokes. And scandal? Don't even think about it. One ill-timed affair, one drunken slip, or a poem with too much sass spoken in public, and the shame doesn't just fall on you. It rains down on your entire family. Your siblings will shun you, your mother will be mortified, and your great uncle might feel compelled to disembowel himself just to save the family's honor. You are not an individual here. You are a representative, a chess piece, a walking liability. But here's the thing. If you play your role perfectly, bow at the right moments, and marry whom you're told, your clan might just whisper your name with something that resembles pride. That, in feudal Japan, is the highest personal achievement badge you can earn. Now, imagine you've survived the suffocating social hierarchy, the weight of the sword, the jewels of status, the unrelenting honor code, and the crushing rice tax. Congratulations. You still have to survive the weather. Feudal Japan is a breathtaking masterpiece of nature. Snow-capped mountains piercing the sky, serene, whispering forests, cherry blossoms that paint the air in pink. But nature here is a cruel, unpredictable force, a constant lurking threat. First come the typhoons, monstrous storms that rage like furious gods. They unleash torrents of rain, winds fierce enough to tear down even the flimsiest walls made of rice paper. Roofs are ripped from homes, roads washed away, and the rice you painstakingly planted over months drifts downstream like fragile memories. Then there are earthquakes, sudden, violent, and without warning. No sirens, no alerts, just a faint tremble, a brief moment where the world seems to pause, and then your home is twisted, shattered, turned sideways. If you survive the quake, beware the fires, because everything around you is made of wood. A single spark, a careless mistake, and everything you hold dear can burn to ashes in minutes. Floods come next, too much rain, swollen rivers, and your village turns into a muddy soup bowl. Your crops drown, your animals vanish, but your landlord still demands taxes, now with cruel interest added on. This is the harsh heartbeat beneath the delicate beauty of feudal Japan, a world where survival is a battle fought not only against people and rigid social rules, but against the very earth and sky themselves. Droughts are just as cruel. Weeks of punishing sun and no rain leave the land cracked and the rice fields dry as a monk's humor. You pray to the gods, you do rituals, you start eyeing the neighbor's well with deep suspicion. And then there's winter, not a snowy wonderland, more like bone-deep cold, thin blankets, and fires that burn out by midnight. Heating isn't central, it's communal suffering. You warm your hands over a clay brazier and hope frostbite isn't fashionable this year. Even volcanoes occasionally join the party. Japan is part of the Ring of Fire. And yes, that's just as fun as it sounds. Eruptions could bury entire regions in ash, lava, or the awkward realization that your shrine is now a rock garden. There's no FEMA, no national relief effort. If your house collapses, you rebuild it. If your food spoils, you go hungry. And if your lord's estate is also affected, well, you still owe taxes. Disaster, after all, is not an excuse. In feudal Japan, nature isn't a background element. It's an ever-present reminder that even the gods might be having a bad day. In feudal Japan, power flows downhill, and so do responsibilities, expectations, and blame. You think you're important? Think again. There's always someone above you. Let's say you're a peasant. Your life is governed by the village headman, who answers to the local samurai, who answers to the daimyo, who answers to the shogun, who maybe possibly whispers to the emperor, who doesn't rule so much as haunt the capital in expensive robes. Even the samurai, fierce sword-carrying enforcers of justice, aren't at the top. They spend their lives serving a lord, waiting for orders, and occasionally fighting in battles they didn't start, over land they don't own for glory they'll never personally receive. In theory, they're honored. In reality, they're very well-dressed middle management with a katana. The daimyo, those powerful lords who control provinces and armies, might seem untouchable until the shogun decides they're getting too bold. Then suddenly, their castles are inspected, their letters intercepted, and their heads very gently removed from their political ambitions. Even the shogun, the military dictator, the most powerful man in Japan, has to keep his eye on the court, the clans, the economy, and at least 4 cousins trying to poison his tea. He rules, yes, but he doesn't sleep well. Meanwhile, the emperor technically outranks everyone but has no actual power. He's like a sacred relic you can't touch but also can't ignore. He blesses rituals, names eras, and occasionally writes poetry. He's also probably broke. You don't move within this hierarchy by your own will. Instead, you are placed, rooted firmly like a meticulously pruned bonsai tree, expected to stay exactly where you are. Ambition isn't celebrated here. It's feared like a shadow that could bring your downfall. The higher you climb, the sharper the blade lurking behind your back becomes. Respect flows only upward, rigid and unyielding, while authority cascades downward with iron fists. Orders are to be obeyed without question. To discuss them is to invite danger. Any sign that you believe yourself above your rank, that's no dream. It's a death sentence dressed in formality. No matter where you find yourself, peasant, merchant, samurai, or lord, someone above controls your fate, and someone below silently hopes you falter. In feudal Japan, what you learn, or if you learn at all, hinges completely on your place on the social ladder. Spoiler alert, if you're near the bottom, the ladder might as well be invisible, and occasionally ablaze. At the top, samurai children are the fortunate few. From an early age, their training is relentless. Reading, writing, swordsmanship, etiquette, archery, poetry, horseback riding, and perhaps most importantly, mastering the ancient art of appearing unimpressed, no matter the storm within. By age 14, a samurai boy is expected to compose a death poem, while others are just learning to write in cursive. Their education is not just rigorous, it has a singular purpose: to serve, to protect, and never disgrace the clan. They study Chinese classics, the strict codes of Bushido, and the art of bowing so precisely that even the gods take note. Then come the merchant and artisan families. Their schooling is practical: basic math, record keeping, a bit of reading. Not Confucius, but calculating the cost of pickled turnips by the barrel. Useful, yes. Glorious, not so much. At the bottom, peasant children get a harsher education. This is a hoe. This is rice. Now start working before the sun beats us to it. Their parents teach them how to farm, to survive, and how to politely avoid dying in front of the tax collector. Literacy among peasants is a rarity. School is a luxury beyond reach. The only scroll they read is nailed to a tree, announcing yet another tax increase. And girls, unless you're from a high-ranking family, you don't get much formal education at all. You're trained in domestic skills, sewing, etiquette, tea ceremonies, and how to maintain silence while managing a household. If you're really fortunate, you might learn calligraphy or poetry, as long as it doesn't distract you from folding laundry with spiritual precision. Education in feudal Japan isn't about personal growth. It's about fulfilling your role without asking questions. The idea of learning for fun would make most elders faint into their sake cups. So yes, knowledge is power, which is exactly why they kept it so tightly controlled. Feudal Japan is a land of breathtaking aesthetics. Everything from the curve of a fan to the placement of a teacup seems designed to soothe the soul and impress your ancestors. But here's the catch: you can and will be judged for doing it wrong. Culture in feudal Japan isn't just art. It's performance with consequences. The way you arrange flowers, pour tea, or fold a kimono isn't left to whimsy. It follows strict codes that have been around longer than your entire bloodline. One misplaced blossom and suddenly you're the talk of the village, and not in a fun, flirty way. Take the tea ceremony, for example. It looks like a quiet, peaceful ritual. In reality, it's a social minefield. Everything is timed. Every movement is choreographed. The guest must sit just so, turn the cup twice, express humble gratitude, and drink in silence, all while mentally calculating whether they've bowed too early, too late, or too enthusiastically. Make a mistake. At best, it's awkward. At worst, it's seen as a character flaw or a moral failing passed down from your disgraceful great-granduncle. Then there's calligraphy. A beautiful form of expression, right? Wrong. It's a test of discipline, personality, and the alignment of your inner spirit. That brushstroke isn't just ink, it's a reflection of your soul's posture. Messy handwriting might as well wear a sign that says emotionally unstable and bad at bowing. Even poetry is dangerous. You don't just write a haiku. You write it in the proper season, on the correct type of paper, using metaphor that references both nature and your emotional landscape without getting too personal or too passionate. You lack refinement? Too dry. You're spiritually cold. Too clever? You're showing off. And now no one's inviting you to the moon viewing party. Culture here is a delicate game. You participate not to relax, but to prove that you are composed, refined, and deeply, deathly afraid of appearing uncultured. Beauty in feudal Japan isn't effortless. It's a battlefield in silk robes. And if your cabana arrangement doesn't follow the rules, well, may the gods have mercy on your bonsai. After all, we've seen the hierarchy, the hygiene, the honor, the endless rice. Let's be honest, you wouldn't last a day in feudal Japan. Not because you're weak, not because you're soft, but because this wasn't a society designed for survival. It was one designed for submission, precision, and quiet, relentless obedience. Every moment was a test of posture, of loyalty, of whether or not you bowed at precisely the correct depth while reciting a seasonal greeting in the right emotional tone. If you failed, there were consequences. Public shame at best, ritual death at worst. There were no days off, no just being yourself. You were born into a role, handed a script, and expected to perform it with deadly elegance for the rest of your life. Deviating wasn't seen as brave, it was seen as dangerous. The individual didn't matter. The clan did, the lord did, the land did. If you were a samurai, you carried the weight of centuries of honor and the very real threat of having to recite poetry before slicing open your own abdomen. If you were a peasant, your days stretched endlessly from dawn, your body bent until your spine curved like a question mark, each movement a plea that the weather would remain kind, and that your lord's favor would not waver. The land you toiled was unforgiving, and survival was a delicate balance between nature's mercy and the whims of those above you. If you were a woman, your existence was a silent symphony of grace, sacrifice, and unspoken endurance. Your every step was measured, your voice subdued, your desires folded beneath layers of duty and expectation. In a world that demanded silence, your strength was woven into your quiet resilience. And for everyone else, the invisible chains of the system held tight, ensuring no one could rise beyond their allotted place. The rigid social order was a fortress built to contain ambition and suppress change, to keep every soul exactly where it was meant to be. Feudal Japan dazzled with breathtaking beauty, the architecture soaring in delicate balance, the intricate rituals, the haunting poetry, the art crafted with unwavering precision. But beneath this mesmerizing elegance lay razor-sharp edges. Discipline was a vice that clenched so tightly it could snap bones. Respect was a devouring force that swallowed individuality whole. No, you wouldn't last here. You'd stumble by speaking out of turn, by laughing too loudly, or by crossing a threshold with the wrong foot. You'd forget to bow, ask the wrong question, or dare to dream of change. And just that would brand you a threat to the unyielding order. And yet therein lies the cruel brilliance of feudal Japan. It was never designed to be easy. It was designed to endure, unyielding, merciless, eternal. In a world where women were barely allowed to speak in public, let alone command armies, Artemisia of Caria emerged like a historical anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of ancient society. By all the rules, she should not have existed, yet there she was, seated on a throne, carrying the weight of both queen and naval commander. Side by side with the most powerful men of her time, Artemisia ruled Halicarnassus, a city perched on the southwestern shores of Asia Minor, today's Turkey. Though a vassal of the sprawling Persian Empire, Halicarnassus stood among a patchwork of territories pulled by the gravitational forces of regional powers. But Artemisia was no mere political heir. She was a force of danger and defiance. Greek by blood, Persian by allegiance, and a woman by nature, she carried the immense burdens of these identities in a world ruled by iron and testosterone. Her father was likely Carian, her mother from Crete. When her husband died, instead of stepping aside for a male successor, Artemisia seized power herself. That quiet rebellion was only the beginning. She did not just rule, she just sought to conquer. When Xerxes the Great launched his legendary invasion of Greece around 480 BCE, Artemisia did something no other woman of her time dared. She volunteered for war. Not to stitch bandages or offer prayers from a safe distance, but to command ships and risk death. Imagine the courage it took to step beyond the shadowed boundaries of expected womanhood and into the chaos of battle, where every wave could drown you, every arrow could end you. She supplied 5 of her own vessels, sleek, fast, deadly, and led them personally into the thick of battle. These ships were extensions of her will, cutting through the tumultuous sea as fiercely as she cut through the limitations imposed by society. Xerxes, ruler of an empire stretching from India to Egypt, didn't just tolerate her presence, he listened to her and valued her. In a court filled with boastful generals and cunning courtiers, her voice was a rare beacon of fierce truth. It was a bold move, some would say foolish, a Greek fighting for Persia, treasonous, a woman on a warship, unthinkable. But Artemisia knew what she was doing. She wasn't motivated by loyalty to bloodlines or empires. She was playing the game of survival and power, and she played it better than most of the men around her. Her heart beat not for heritage, but for mastery, for the fierce fire of control in a world that sought to cage her. In a world carved up by men with swords, Artemisia didn't ask for permission. She built her fleet, sailed into history, and dared anyone to stop her. Each stroke of her oars was a rebellion against the cages forged by tradition. Each cannon fired a declaration: she would not be invisible. By siding with Xerxes, Artemisia effectively declared war on her own people, the Greeks. It was a decision that raised eyebrows even before a single oar hit the water. And it wasn't just the usual whispers of treachery. This was personal to the Greeks. She was a traitor in fine robes, a queen turned mercenary, a woman who had traded heritage for favor at a foreign king's table. But Artemisia didn't seem the least bit bothered. In fact, she doubled down. Defiance was her armor, and she wore it with unshakable pride. She sailed into the campaign like she belonged at the high table of Persian power, and in many ways she did. In a realm where loyalty was currency and blood was the law, she was a wild card, untamed and unbound. Xerxes, famous for surrounding himself with brutal warriors and sycophants, found in Artemisia something he rarely encountered: honesty. Blunt, piercing honesty. She told him not what he wanted to hear, but what he needed to know. Her words cut through the fog of flattery and fear, a sharp blade of clarity in a court of shadows. In council meetings surrounded by decorated generals and satraps with bloodied boots, Artemisia spoke with clarity and strategy. Her mind was a fortress of cold logic and fierce intuition. She was rarely wrong. Her advice was sharp, tactical, and often laced with warnings others were too proud to voice. Before the infamous Battle of Salamis, she urged Xerxes to avoid direct naval confrontation with the Greeks, warning that the cramped straits would nullify Persia's numerical advantage. Her voice was a lone lighthouse warning of the rocky shores ahead, but often such warnings are drowned in the storm of pride. But Xerxes, swayed by overconfidence and flattery, ignored her. That decision would come back to haunt him. Even among her Persian allies, Artemisia's presence was complicated. Many commanders resented her authority. After all, she wasn't just a woman, she was a Greek woman, one who told truth to power and led her own ships with unnerving precision. She wasn't there as a figurehead or symbolic mascot, she was there to win. That unsettled more than a few mustachioed warlords who'd spent their lives in the business of conquest. Meanwhile, back in Greece, her name spread like a stain. Herodotus himself, from Halicarnassus, seemed both fascinated and baffled by her. He documented her with the mix of awe and suspicion usually reserved for mythical creatures. To some, she was Medusa in a breastplate. To others, a misunderstood genius with the audacity to think like a man, and better than most of them. Artemisia was many things: loyalist, strategist, traitor, visionary. But above all, she was a political animal who understood one hard truth in war: identity bends, only power remains. If there was ever a stage that tested Artemisia's brilliance and boldness, it was the Battle of Salamis. This wasn't just any battle, it was the naval showdown of the Greco-Persian Wars. The Persian fleet, massive and overconfident, squared off against a much smaller but strategically positioned Greek navy in the narrow straits near Athens. It was here that Xerxes' campaign would falter, and it was here that Artemisia would make one of the most shocking tactical moves of her career. Let's rewind slightly. Artemisia had warned Xerxes not to engage the Greeks in these narrow waters. She argued correctly that their superior maneuverability and familiarity with the terrain would nullify the Persian size advantage. But Xerxes, intoxicated by numbers and pride, dismissed her warning. He wanted a spectacular victory. What he got instead was humiliation. As the battle raged, chaos swallowed the Persian lines. Ships collided, formations broke, and Greek triremes darted like sharks between lumbering vessels. It was a slaughter. Beneath the clashing waves and roaring battle cries lies a story of defiance and sharp intellect. Artemisia stood alone in a sea of doubt and prejudice, her very presence unsettling the traditional power dynamics of the Persian war machine. Imagine the fierce isolation of a woman whose loyalty was questioned, whose authority was challenged, yet who held steady like the unyielding keel of a warship slicing through stormy seas. She was not simply fighting an enemy fleet, but battling the invisible tides of gender bias and cultural suspicion. Xerxes' hubris blinded him to her wisdom, a costly mistake that would unravel his grand ambitions. The Battle of Salamis was more than a clash of armies. It was a crucible where intellect, courage, and raw survival instinct met brutal reality. In that narrow strait, every misstep was magnified, every command carried the weight of life and death. Artemisia's prescient caution was drowned out by pride, yet her audacity would echo through history, a testament to a fierce mind refusing to be tethered by identity or expectation. This was not just war. It was a dramatic testament to power's harshest truth. In the tempest of conflict, it is not who you are, but what you command that shapes destiny. And in the middle of it all was Artemisia, commanding her flagship, surrounded by allies and enemies, trying to survive a collapsing battle. The air was thick with tension, smoke, and salt spray, a storm of chaos swirling around her as steel clashed and ships burned. Here's where things get wild. With a Greek ship pursuing her relentlessly, Artemisia made a decision that historians still debate today. It was a choice carved from desperation, sharp and unforgiving. She ordered her ship to ram and sink another Persian vessel, one from an allied king no less. A betrayal in the heat of battle, a stab into the heart of her own side. The move was so unexpected that the Greeks, assuming she must be on their side, stopped chasing her. She slipped away untouched, a ghost fading into the mist of war. Xerxes, watching from a hilltop, supposedly witnessed this and turned to his aides, exclaiming, My men have become women. His voice dripping with disbelief, shock, and perhaps begrudging respect. And my women have become men. It was perhaps the highest praise he ever gave a subordinate, especially one who had just sacrificed a friendly ship to save herself. A paradox wrapped in admiration and scorn. But Artemisia's move wasn't just about survival. It was strategy, misdirection, and cold-blooded calculation wrapped into one. She read the battlefield in real time and made a split-second decision that saved her ship, her crew, and possibly her own life. In that brutal moment, she became both predator and protector, ruthless and wise. It was controversial, it was brutal, but it worked. While many Persian commanders died that day or fell into disgrace, Artemisia sailed back not as a failure, but as one of the only leaders Xerxes still trusted. The weight of that trust was heavy, but earned through fire. The Persian fleet limped back from Salamis, humiliated. Ships were lost, morale shattered, and the myth of Persian naval invincibility obliterated. For many commanders, this was the beginning of the end. But for Artemisia, it was a strange kind of triumph. In the middle of a disastrous campaign, she emerged as the lone figure of competence, someone who had warned the king, acted decisively, and escaped unscathed. Xerxes took notice. In the wreckage of defeat, she was a beacon of fierce resilience. Now back on land, licking the wounds of defeat, the Persian war machine had to pivot. In a rare moment of candid trust, Xerxes turned once again to Artemisia, not as a novelty, but as his most reliable advisor. The battlefield had thinned the ranks of certainty, and she stood firm. He asked her a deeply personal question. What should he do next? Artemisia, ever blunt, told him exactly what no proud emperor wanted to hear: retreat. Her words cut through the pride of empire, but carried the wisdom of survival. She urged him to return to Persia and leave his trusted General Mardonius in charge of the remaining campaign in Greece. You've achieved what you needed. Athens has burned. Don't push your luck. That was essentially her message, and incredibly, Xerxes listened. The man who had ignored most of his war council followed the advice of a single woman. It was a moment that confirmed what others had only suspected. Artemisia wasn't just brave, she was politically lethal. She knew when to fight, when to deceive, and now when to walk away. Her power didn't come from brute force. It came from clarity, something in short supply among kings and conquerors. In the aftermath, she was entrusted with the guardianship of Xerxes' sons, an honor that spoke volumes. In ancient courts, you didn't hand your heirs to just anyone. You chose someone whose loyalty was ironclad and whose judgment could be trusted. Artemisia, a woman born on the fringes of empire, had now placed herself right at its heart. Back in Halicarnassus, she returned not as a queen uncertain of her place, but as a figure of undeniable consequence. Her legend began to take root. She wasn't just a ruler anymore. She was the woman who stood face to face with empires and didn't blink. Where most would have sought safety and silence, Artemisia had stepped into war, and somehow she came back more powerful than when she left. While Artemisia's military feats gained her notoriety, her legacy didn't grow alone on the battlefield. It also thrived in the minds of those who recorded it, especially in the pen of Herodotus, the so-called father of history, who just so happened to be born in Halicarnass, the very city Artemisia ruled. This geographic coincidence added an almost eerie intimacy to his account of her life. He wasn't writing about some distant myth, he was writing about his queen. And yet, Herodotus didn't cast her as a simple symbol of feminine virtue or villainy. Instead, he portrayed Artemisia as something far more complex and rare in history, a leader who was competent, calculating, and utterly compelling. His account of the Battle of Salamis reveals not just her bravery, but her cold, sharp pragmatism, the sinking of the Allied ship, the daring escape amidst Greek confusion, the ruthless brilliance of every move. In Herodotus' narrative, Artemisia becomes more than a commander. She embodies contradiction, both admired and feared, respected and doubted. But make no mistake, her respect was hard-won. She lived in the shadow of towering men like Xerxes and Mardonius, yet somehow she outshone them all. While they were consumed by unchecked ambition, she was guided by foresight. She knew precisely when to fight and when to vanish. Such wisdom is rare. Rarer still when wielded by a woman in a society that equated femininity with weakness. Perhaps that is what fascinated Herodotus the most. Artemisia refused to fit into the cultural mold of her era, defying the neat categories historians often rely on. She wasn't a rebel in name, but she disobeyed. She wasn't a feminist, because that concept didn't exist, but she subverted patriarchy through sheer competence alone. Her legacy did not blaze through grand monuments or golden statues, but echoed quietly in stories told by men who could not help but admit she surpassed them. In war councils, she outthought them. In battle, she outmaneuvered them. In politics, she outlasted them. For all their noise and power, the men of her time needed scribes to preserve their memory. Artemisia had something better, or as Herodotus set down his scroll and dipped his pen again, he wasn't just recording history, he was chronicling a riddle shaped like a queen. Strangely, the name Artemisia didn't fade after her death. A century later, it resurfaced, carried by another queen, Artemisia II of Caria, likely her namesake and descendant, who also ruled over Halicarnassus. But while the second Artemisia never commanded fleets in battle, she too would carve her name into the bones of history, quite literally. Her claim to fame, building one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. The second Artemisia commissioned this towering marble tomb for her husband Mausolus, who was also her brother, because ancient dynastic politics never failed to get awkward. But it wasn't just a tribute to grief. It was a statement, a monument to carry an identity and an echo of the strength that the first Artemisia had once wielded. Historians have long debated whether the two women were directly related, mother and daughter, aunt and niece, or possibly not related at all. But one thing is clear. The name Artemisia had by then become synonymous with power, intellect, and bold rule. The legacy of the original queen had seeped so deeply into the identity of Halicarnassus that future generations wore it like armor. Even more fascinating is how the later Artemisia's mausoleum gave us the very word we use today for monumental tombs, mausoleum, a linguistic legacy born from stone, grief, and political theater. While the second Artemisia was known for mourning, she was also a capable ruler, continuing the thread of female leadership in a corner of the ancient world where that was anything but normal. But let's not forget the foundation for all of this was laid by the first Artemisia, the naval commander, the queen who advised Xerxes, the woman who navigated the Greek world as both insider and outsider. Without her, the name might have faded. Halicarnassus might have been just another forgotten city on a forgotten coast. Instead, it became a beacon, a place where two powerful women shaped history, not through accident, but through audacity. Their stories, though separated by time, speak to each other across the centuries, one with ships, one with stone, and both with names history could not quite bury. Artemisia's story has always lived in the in-between, between empires, between genders, between legend and history. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the way her legacy has been argued, bent, and reinterpreted over the centuries. Was she a Persian puppet, a Greek traitor, or simply a sovereign playing chess while others were busy swinging swords? To Persians, she was a loyal commander, one of the few who gave sound advice and fought with distinction. Xerxes clearly trusted her more than many of his seasoned generals. That in itself speaks volumes about her political sharpness and composure under pressure. In the Persian world, her loyalty was seen as honorable, perhaps even heroic. To the Greeks, it was far more complicated. Many branded her a turncoat, a traitor who had abandoned her Hellenic roots to side with an Eastern despot. Yet even Greek chroniclers, especially Herodotus, could not help but admire her intelligence and cunning. She became, in many ways, a living reflection of their own contradictions, showing that not all Greeks stood with Greece and not all Persians were villains. She shattered the rigid lines that war sought to draw. Fast forward to the modern era, where historians and readers alike continue to wrestle with what she represents, perhaps a feminist icon before feminism existed, or a symbol of sharp, pragmatic leadership in a world designed to exclude her. Her legacy captivates not because she conformed to the mold of ancient queens, but because she broke it apart. In military history, she is often cited as a rare example of a woman commanding warships in antiquity. Politically, she stands as a beacon of reason amid an age marred by hubris. In popular culture, her image resurfaces, sometimes distorted, sometimes glamorized, but always unmistakable. But here's the truth. Artemisia never cared about legacy, not as we understand it today. She wasn't building a brand or penning memoirs. She fought to survive, to rule, to win. That raw drive is what makes her story so enduring. Her story was never shaped by vanity or myth-making. It was forged through decisions, difficult, controversial, and often just. She belonged neither to Persia nor to Greece. She belonged only to herself. As centuries passed, her story transformed, as all great stories do. She became myth, metaphor, sometimes monster. Writers and dramatists remolded her as they wished. In some tales, she was a ruthless seductress. In others, a bloodthirsty warrior queen. The real Artemisia, the strategist, the realist, the survivor, was buried beneath layers of fantasy and fear. This distortion stemmed from a simple truth. Men did not know how to comprehend her. A woman who gave orders, who stood unshaken in war's face, who corrected kings and proved them wrong. That unsettled the ancient world deeply. So storytellers did what they often do when faced with a woman beyond their control. They rewrote her story. One bizarre legend claimed that she fell hopelessly in love with a man who didn't return her affections, and in a fit of despair, she threw herself from a cliff. Not exactly the kind of thing a steely naval commander does, but it served the narrative of turning strength into tragedy. Another version painted her as a venomous schemer, more witch than queen. It's a pattern that repeats across history. When a woman gains power through intellect or audacity, later generations either soften her into a damsel or darken her into a villain. Artemisia got both treatments, neither of which honored the truth. The real Artemisia didn't rule with seduction or superstition. She ruled with vision, reason, and cold strategic brilliance. She played a man's game by her own rules and won. That, more than anything, terrified those who came after her, because if one woman could do it, what was to stop others? Even in modern times, adaptations continue to distort her. Hollywood, for example, recast her as a vengeance-fueled femme fatale in 300: Rise of an Empire. Entertaining? Sure. Accurate? Absolutely not. But the fact that she still draws attention, still demands reinvention, proves one thing. Her legacy has teeth. The woman they feared didn't die. She evolved into myth, into memory, and into the long, uncomfortable question history keeps asking. What if more women had been like Artemisia? When Artemisia of Korea vanished from the records, she didn't vanish from history. She simply shifted form like the wake left behind a warship. Her legacy rippled outward long after she sailed her final voyage. No grand tomb marks her resting place, no statues survive bearing her likeness, and yet her presence endures, etched into the bones of Hickarns, whispered in the pages of ancient chronicles, and debated in the halls of every historian trying to understand how she pulled off the impossible. Because Artemisia's life was exactly that, impossible. She ruled when women weren't supposed to rule, fought in wars where women weren't supposed to fight, gave advice where women weren't supposed to speak, and still somehow she was heard. She wasn't merely tolerated, she was respected. That is perhaps her rarest achievement, not just surviving the ancient world as a woman in power, but earning the kind of grudging admiration that made even her enemies pause. Centuries later, her name remains a paradox, simultaneously exalted and obscured. She's not the household name that Cleopatra or Joan of Arc became, but perhaps that's fitting. Artemisia didn't chase legend, she chased outcomes. She wasn't adorned with mythic beauty or tragic romance. She was a leader, a realist, a strategist. Her drama played out not in poetry, but in the silence of war rooms, in the tight quarters of a ship, and in the long stare of a king who chose to listen. Today, her story invites re-examination, not just as a tale of a woman in a man's world, but as a reminder that courage doesn't always wear a crown or raise a sword. Sometimes it sits at the edge of power, says the uncomfortable thing, and sails straight into chaos. Artemisia didn't need to be rescued. She didn't need to be rewritten. What she needed, what she still deserves, is to be remembered as she was: sharp, dangerous, brilliant. In an empire built by men, she charted her own course across hostile seas against cultural gravity and through the fog of war. And as long as ships sail and history remembers those who dare to speak when silence is safer, Artemisia of Caria will never be truly gone. Before lenses and satellites, before Copernicus dared rearrange the cosmos, humanity had only two tools for unlocking the secrets of the sky: the naked eye and stone. And somehow, that was enough. Across the ancient world, civilizations looked up not just in wonder, but with intent. The stars were not mere decoration. They were calendars, compasses, gods, and prophecies. And so began the oldest science of all, astronomy. Long before it had a name, it was a necessity. Farmers needed to know when to plant, sailors needed to know how to steer, priests needed to know when to perform the right ritual at the right celestial moment. Astronomers, often indistinguishable from priests, kings, or mathematicians, were the ones everyone relied on. But without telescopes, how did they do it? They built temples not just for worship, but for watching. Massive structures like Stonehenge in England, Nabta Playa in Egypt, and the Great Pyramids of Mesoamerica weren't just tombs or altars. They were observatories carefully aligned with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Many were designed to capture specific light patterns on solstices and equinoxes, sacred architecture with astronomical purpose. The Great Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak in Egypt, for example, was oriented so that the sun would rise precisely between its pylons on the summer solstice. The Maya at Chichen Itza built El Castillo, a pyramid that casts a shadow of a serpent slithering down its staircase on the spring and autumn equinoxes. In India, the towering stone instruments of Jantar Mantar stand as timeless monuments to human curiosity and precision. These were no mere coincidences or crude estimations. They were carefully engineered marvels, born of data and devotion, designed to track the subtle shifts of celestial bodies with astounding accuracy. And this was not an isolated achievement. From the lofty peaks of the Andes to the life-giving waters of the Nile, from the ancient streets of Babylon to the sprawling cities of Beijing, civilizations built their lives and legacies with the stars as their guide. Stone and starlight merged as humans charted the dance of planets, the drama of eclipses, and the puzzling retrograde paths, all through patient observation and a profound reverence for cosmic order. The sky was more than a spectacle. It was a measured reality, mapped with care and embedded into the very fabric of their cities. Long before glass lenses could magnify the heavens, ancient peoples recorded the celestial rhythm in stone and silence with breathtaking precision. In the sun-baked floodplains of Mesopotamia, the Sumerians gazed upward and found not randomness, but a grand design. Around 3000 BCE, they were more than storytellers. They were architects of cosmic time. To them, the sky was a living calendar, a schedule etched in light, and their sacred duty was to decode its meaning. These early astronomers laid the foundation for what we now know as celestial mechanics. Observing the steady motions of the sun, moon, and planets, they recognized that the heavens were not chaotic, but clocks of divine rhythm. From this understanding emerged one of humanity's earliest calendars, based on the lunar cycle. It wasn't flawless, but it was a vital tool that guided planting seasons and sacred rituals. And speaking of time, the Sumerians gifted us the sexagesimal system, the base 60 counting method still woven into our measurement of minutes, seconds, and degrees. Every glance at a clock or a compass echoes a 5,000-year-old legacy. Without telescopes, they built towering ziggurats, stepped platforms reaching toward the heavens. From these elevated stages, priest astronomers meticulously recorded celestial events on clay tablets. The rise of Venus on the horizon, the blood-red moon during eclipses, the return of distant star clusters after long absences. They called these watchers Umanu, the learned ones, blending science with spiritual insight. Over centuries, Sumerian stargazing evolved into a systematic science. Their heirs, the Babylonians, expanded star catalogs, predicted eclipses with eerie precision, and named constellations that guide our skies even today. But it all began with the Sumerians scribbling celestial movements in cuneiform and laying down the earliest astronomical records we've ever found. Perhaps most impressive is how this early science blended seamlessly with mythology. To them, the sky was divine yet predictable. The gods moved in patterns, and if you understood those patterns, you could align your crops, your rituals, and your fate. The Sumerians didn't just look up in awe, they looked up and began to measure. In doing so, they started humanity's long relationship with the stars. If the Sumerians lit the first fire of astronomy, the Babylonians poured oil on it and turned it into an inferno of precision. By the time their empire flourished around 1800 BCE, Babylonian astronomers weren't just watching the skies, they were predicting them. Eclipses, planetary conjunctions, retrograde motion, all charted, logged, and projected with stunning regularity. They weren't guessing, they were calculating. The Babylonians took the Sumerians' observational legacy and supercharged it with math. They recorded the positions of stars, planets, and the moon on clay tablets known today as the Enuma Anu Enlil and the Mule Apin, some of the oldest known astronomical texts in existence. These weren't bedtime stories. They were raw data, line after line of celestial movements. When Venus would rise, how long it would shine, when a solar eclipse might strike. These tablets were essentially the world's first almanac. The most remarkable part? They could predict lunar eclipses using a pattern known as the Saros cycle, a period of roughly 18 years after which eclipses repeat. They didn't understand why it worked, but they knew it did. That was enough for a culture that fused divination with astronomy. Being able to foresee cosmic events gave them enormous power, both spiritual and political. And while the Greeks are often credited with inventing the zodiac, the truth is the Babylonians got there first. They divided the sky into 12 equal parts, each anchored to a constellation, and laid the foundation for what would become the zodiac signs we still use and misuse today. Yes, when someone asks your sign, you can thank Babylon. But what really sets the Babylonians apart is their mathematical boldness. They tracked planetary motion, even retrograde paths, and used arithmetic methods to approximate celestial cycles. Not geometric models, mind you, that would come later with the Greeks, but arithmetic that worked, and for practical purposes, that was more than enough. They saw the universe as a ledger of patterns, a giant machine of repeating cycles. Their astronomers were not just mystics or priests, they were early scientists, hunched over tablets decoding the rhythms of the cosmos in symbols and numbers, in the dark. They wrote the sky. While the Babylonians were busy predicting eclipses, the ancient Egyptians were sinking their entire civilization to the stars, quite literally, in the Nile Valley. Astronomy wasn't just a curiosity, it was survival. And at the heart of it all was a single star, Sirius, the brightest light in the night sky. The Egyptians noticed something extraordinary. Each year, just before the annual flooding of the Nile, Sirius would reappear on the horizon during dawn. This event, known as the helical rising of Sirius, became the cornerstone of their calendar. That wasn't just poetic, it was vital. The Nile's floodwaters determined crop cycles, and missing that window could mean famine. So the Egyptians created a 365-day solar calendar divided into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 festival days. It was remarkably close to our modern calendar, centuries before Julius Caesar ever got involved. But the Egyptians didn't stop with Sirius. They tracked the sun, moon, and stars from their temples, many of which were aligned with astonishing astronomical precision. The Temple of Karnak, for instance, was oriented so the sun would rise directly through its axis during the summer solstice. Other temples lined up with the rising and setting of stars considered sacred. And then there were the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed around 2560 BCE, was aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points. Its shafts may have been pointed towards specific stars, possibly Orion and Sirius, hinting at a celestial connection between the heavens and the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. This wasn't just burial architecture, it was cosmological engineering. Egyptian priests often served double duty as astronomers. They observed the skies not only for ritual timing, but for signs, omens, and the will of the gods. Beneath these scientific marvels lies a profound human story, one of awe, survival, and an ancient desire to understand our place in the cosmos. Imagine the watchful eyes of Babylonian scholars poring over clay tablets in flickering lamplight, their minds unraveling the celestial dance with nothing but numbers and raw intellect. Think of Egyptian priests standing silently in shadowed temples as dawn breaks, feeling the pulse of Sirius' return and knowing that life itself hinges on this star's timing. Their connection to the heavens was not abstract, but visceral. The rhythm of stars was the rhythm of their world, dictating when to plant, when to harvest, when to hope, and when to fear. The pyramids and temples stand as frozen hymns to this cosmic relationship, monuments that bind human ambition with the infinite sky, where every stone laid was a step toward eternity. In that interplay between earth and sky, between mortal and divine, ancient civilizations forged a legacy of wonder and wisdom, reminding us that long before modern science, humans looked up at the stars not just with curiosity but with a profound, almost sacred reverence for the mystery above. Astronomy, theology, and governance were tightly interwoven. To rule Egypt was to understand the sky. What's truly remarkable is that without telescopes, without even lenses, they developed an entire system for tracking time, orienting buildings, and forecasting natural events, all based on patient, unwavering observation. With relentless precision, the Egyptians didn't look at the sky for entertainment. They looked up and saw a divine clock ticking with purpose, echoing eternity itself. Each movement of the stars and planets was a whisper from the cosmos, a message that shaped the rhythm of their lives. Deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica, long before Europeans set foot in the New World, the Maya were building one of the most sophisticated astronomical systems the world had ever seen. Without metal tools, without wheels, and without telescopes, they mapped the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars with a precision that continues to baffle modern scholars. To the Maya, astronomy was not a luxury reserved for the learned elite. It was the very framework of society itself. Their rulers were seen as cosmic intermediaries, conduits between the heavens and the earth. Every major political or religious event was meticulously timed to align with a celestial counterpart. Eclipses, solstices, equinoxes, and the cycles of Venus were not merely observed, they were wielded as instruments to legitimize power and divine right. One of their most striking achievements was their tracking of Venus. The Maya noted that Venus disappeared and reappeared in the sky in a repeating cycle of 584 days. This rhythm was intricately woven into their ritual warfare and calendar systems, a celestial drumbeat that guided the pulse of their civilization. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving pre-Columbian manuscripts, contains a Venus table tracking the planet's movements over hundreds of years, with an astonishing error of less than 1 day. This wasn't coincidence, it was the result of generations of dedicated stargazing. But the Maya didn't stop there. They developed the long count calendar, capable of tracking dates over spans of thousands of years. Their understanding of the solar year was incredibly precise, about 365.20 days, remarkably close to the modern value we use today. Their calendar systems were so refined that multiple ones ran simultaneously. The 260-day ritual calendar, Tzolk'in, the 365-day solar calendar, Hab, and the long count, which served historical chronology. And their observatories, though they lacked glass domes, they embodied stone genius. The El Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza was crafted with specific windows and alignments that allowed Maya priests to track the movements of Venus with meticulous accuracy. Even the Sun Temple staircases and shadow effects were timed to equinoxes, like the famous serpent shadow that slithers down El Castillo during spring and autumn, a living symbol of cosmic harmony carved in stone. The Maya weren't just watching the skies, they were synchronizing their civilization with them. Their kings ruled by the stars, their temples rose in tune with solstices, and their wars were timed with the wanderings of Venus. They didn't just read the cosmos, they wove it into the fabric of life. In ancient China, astronomy wasn't simply a science, it was a matter of state. The emperor, regarded as the son of heaven, ruled with the mandate of heaven, a cosmic endorsement that could be revoked if the stars sent the wrong message. That made astronomy both sacred and political. If the sky changed, so could the dynasty. As early as 2000 BCE, Chinese astronomers were tracking celestial events and documenting them with methodical care. They recorded comets, novae, eclipses, sunspots, and planetary motions. Some of these records, like those found in the Shi records of the Grand Historian and the Book of Han, are still referenced by modern scientists today to verify ancient astronomical phenomena. Perhaps most remarkable is their documentation of a supernova explosion in 1054 CE, visible in daylight for 23 days. Chinese astronomers recorded its location with such accuracy that modern astronomers use the data to identify the remnants now known as the Crab Nebula. But China's astronomical prowess didn't rely on mystical interpretation alone. They developed mechanical devices such as armillary spheres and gnomons, shadow-casting rods to measure the altitude of the sun and the positions of stars. In fact, the Chinese had working water-powered celestial globes and astronomical clocks centuries before Europe caught up. Chinese astronomers divided the sky into 28 lunar mansions, similar in concept to Western constellations, and used them for both navigation and timekeeping. They also created the Chinese lunisolar calendar, which balanced lunar months with the solar year, and remains in use today to determine traditional holidays like the Lunar New Year. One of their key contributions was the meticulous recording of eclipses. They not only predicted solar and lunar eclipses, but sometimes tied them to dynastic omens. If an eclipse occurred and the emperor hadn't been forewarned, it was considered a failure of the astronomers, and sometimes a sign that the emperor had lost the mandate of heaven. In short, astronomy in China wasn't tucked away in a scholar's study. It stood at the very core of governance, divinity, and national survival. The stars didn't just tell time, they told truth, and the empire listened. In ancient India, astronomy was never a separate discipline. It was interwoven with philosophy, ritual, and mathematics. And metaphysics, known as geotissia, the science of light, Indian astronomy began as a tool for determining auspicious timings for rituals, but evolved into one of the most mathematically dense systems of celestial observation in the ancient world. The earliest references to celestial events appear in the Vedas, composed around 1500 BCE. These sacred texts mention the sun, moon, and planetary cycles, as well as the division of the sky into 27 nakshatras, lunar mansions that formed the core of early Indian sky mapping. These nakshatras were tied to both mythology and calculation, forming the basis of astrological charts and calendars still used in India today. But Indian astronomy wasn't just poetic. It was shockingly precise. Ancient scholars developed models for the solar year that were more accurate than the Julian calendar introduced much later by the Romans. The Surya Siddhanta, a foundational astronomical text compiled around 500 CE, based on earlier knowledge, describes the Earth's axial tilt, the elliptical orbits of planets, and even the concept of gravity, centuries before Newton. Perhaps the most revolutionary figure in Indian astronomy was Aryabhata, who in 499 CE proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis daily, a theory rarely entertained in other parts of the world at that time. He also calculated the length of the solar year at 365.358 days, just a tiny fraction off from modern values, and developed advanced trigonometric functions to assist in astronomical calculations. Indian astronomers also created sophisticated signs, worked with decimal notation, and used shadow instruments and spheres to measure angles and altitudes. Observatories were often aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary conjunctions. But beyond technical achievements, Indian astronomy carried a cosmic elegance. The universe wasn't just a machine, it was a cycle, a dance of time and space unfolding endlessly. Astronomy wasn't about domination over nature, it was about harmony with it. In the Indian worldview, understanding the heavens was a way of understanding the self, a geometry of spirit, where planets moved not just across the sky, but through the soul. If other civilizations looked to the sky for guidance, ritual, or survival, the ancient Greeks looked up and asked why. Why do the stars move? Why do planets wander? And most importantly, can the cosmos be explained by reason? Greek astronomy marked a turning point in humanity's relationship with the heavens. Where others saw patterns and portents, the Greeks sought laws. They weren't just observers, they were theorists trying to decode the sky using mathematics, geometry, and philosophy. It began with Thales of Miletus, one of the first to suggest that celestial phenomena had natural causes. Then came Anaximander, who imagined the Earth floating in space unsupported and suggested that the heavens formed a sphere. These ideas may sound crude today, but for their time, they were revolutionary. The true leap came with Pythagoras, who viewed the cosmos as a system of perfect harmony, a music of the spheres governed by mathematical ratios. His followers believed the universe could be understood through numbers, laying the foundation for theoretical astronomy. But it was Aristarchus of Samos who came closest to modern truth. In the 3rd century BCE, he proposed a heliocentric model, with the sun, not the Earth, at the center of the universe. His ideas were ignored for nearly 2,000 years, but they planted a seed that would later bloom with Copernicus. Then came Hipparchus, the father of observational astronomy. He created the first star catalog, divided stars by brightness, discovered the precession of the equinoxes, and developed trigonometric tools to calculate celestial positions. His accuracy was astonishing, especially without telescopes. And finally, there was Claudius Ptolemy, whose Almagest became the authoritative astronomical text for over a millennium. He synthesized Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian knowledge into a geocentric model that explained planetary motion using epicycles and deference, a complex yet elegant system that worked until it didn't. While some Greek ideas were wrong, their commitment to rational explanation and systematic modeling changed the game. They taught the world that the stars weren't random. They were governed by patterns that the human mind could understand. With the Greeks, astronomy became more than observation. It became an argument between earth and sky, between logic and myth, and between what we see and what we know. By the time the telescope was invented in the early 17th century, humanity had already spent thousands of years watching the skies with nothing but eyes, shadows, and stone. What those ancient civilizations accomplished is truly breathtaking. They mapped the stars, tracked planets, predicted eclipses, and constructed monuments perfectly aligned with solstices and equinoxes, all without the aid of lenses, satellites, or electricity. Even more remarkable is that they achieved this independently. The Sumerians in Mesopotamia, the Maya in Mesoamerica, the Chinese and Indians in Asia, and the Greeks and Egyptians around the Mediterranean. Each developed unique astronomical systems rooted deeply in their own worldviews. Despite being separated by vast oceans, they arrived at a shared understanding. The heavens move with order, and that order is essential. Ancient astronomy was never confined to remote observatories. It influenced agriculture, religion, architecture, politics, and philosophy. It determined when to plant crops, when to pray, when to build, and when to rule. Across every culture, comprehending the sky was a path to grasping the divine, or at the very least, to recognizing one's place within the immense machinery of existence. Though their models differed, some geocentric, some mythological, some cyclical, they all shared a profound, unwavering reverence for the cosmos. For many, the sky was not a mere backdrop. It was alive, purposeful, and sacred. The invention of the telescope would later revolutionize everything, unveiling moons orbiting Jupiter, the phases of Venus, sunspots, and galaxies far beyond our own. Yet the foundation, the meticulous mapping, the detailed records, the boundless curiosity, belong to these ancient peoples. Today, every time we consult a calendar, track stars with a phone app, or celebrate a solstice, we carry forward their legacy. Our GPS satellites and space missions stand on the bedrock they laid in clay, stone, and papyrus. They didn't know about black holes or cosmic microwave backgrounds, but they asked the right questions. They looked up and they noticed. In that darkness, unknowingly, they became the first scientists, quietly, faithfully inscribing their questions in the sky. And thanks to them, we now have the tools to look deeper, not just into space, but into our own origins. In 1803, something unprecedented happened. A young republic, barely 3 decades old, bought a landmass so vast it doubled its territory overnight. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't just a real estate deal, it was a geopolitical thunderclap. With the stroke of a pen, the United States acquired more than 828,000 square miles of land from France, stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. 13 future states would eventually rise from this vast, fertile terrain. The price? A cool $15 million, roughly 4 cents an acre. But what makes this even more extraordinary is that no one, not even the Americans, saw it coming. At the time, President Thomas Jefferson had one goal: to secure access to the Mississippi River and the crucial port city of New Orleans. The young nation was heavily dependent on river trade. Farmers in the Ohio Valley needed to float their goods south, and whoever controlled New Orleans held the keys to economic survival. Jefferson authorized diplomats to offer France up to $10 million just for New Orleans and some nearby lands. That's it. But when those diplomats arrived, they were blindsided. The French had a counteroffer, not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory. Why? France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, was shifting its priorities. Napoleon had dreams of a grand North American empire, but the Haitian Revolution had crushed French ambitions in the Caribbean. Disease, rebellion, and mounting tensions with Britain made holding on to Louisiana more trouble than it was worth. Napoleon needed money for war, not swamps and prairie. Faced with an unexpected opportunity, the American negotiators said yes, quickly, even before they could get full approval from Jefferson. After all, this wasn't just a port. It was the Mississippi River, the Great Plains, access to the Rocky Mountains, and future control over the heart of the continent. What Jefferson received wasn't just land, it was destiny, a blank canvas for westward expansion and national growth. After all these stories and vivid glimpses into the past, from the hardworking peasants, the strict samurai class, to brave heroines and determined ancient astronomers, are you satisfied with the content you've just experienced? Do you feel connected to the history and emotions of these people? If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss any exciting content ahead. And finally, wishing you a peaceful night, deep sleep, and sweet dreams.